Buck, welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah.
How's it feel heading into training camps with mini camp starting tomorrow?
Yeah, well, it's right around the corner. I think everybody's excited. It's an exciting time of the year, and everybody's just ready to go.
You've had a lot of changes in terms of your life since the end of last season. What has the off season been like for you?
Well, every off season is different. Obviously, this was a change for me, but it's been exciting. It's been great. My mindset always is you learn along the way, and I've already learned a lot, and excited for this next step. I think everybody's ready to get back out at competing and seeing what we look like early.
What do you think you're going to look like? I mean, Nathan mentioned the fact that the off season was too long, and the guys obviously are eager to get there. With all the moves that were made here, what kind of football team do you think you're going to have?
Well, I think we're still going to implement what style that we want to play, but it's up to the players. They're going to dictate that more than anybody. We're going to play to our personnel. We're going to adapt if need be. But that's the exciting part about training camp. I think everybody's kind of in that boat. Every off season is long. You have a lot of time to think about who you want to be and what you want to implement and what you want to do. But until you actually get the players out there, it's hard to tell. I know the type of vision that we want to have and the standard that we're going to uphold. So those things won't change. But at the end of it all, it's going to be up to the players.
Does Nathan look like to you a guy who's ready to be a leader in all sense of the words? In the off season, you got to work with the guys. I mean, last year was so different when he came in. What do you see from Nathan at the beginning of the season?
Well, I can't speak too much on, his, previous years. I can just go on what I've seen. And, he's been ready. I remember being in this room, a number of months ago, and you could tell that he was ready to get out there and start, taking ownership and just being the guy that, the Lions need him to be. So he's ready to go. He is the type of guy you want running your huddle, and we're excited to get him out there.
As a first-time head coach, you're probably going to have some players try to test you and see what they can get away with. And for you on day one of camp, what's the big message you want to impart in terms of culture that Buck Pierce wants to build? Well,
I think it's important that the people that you surround yourself, creates the culture, right? We understand where we need to get to, and those things need to be implemented early, right? I'll keep a lot of that stuff in-house, with our players. But I think they all understand the message. Training camp isn't just about X's and O's and, running plays that are drawn up on the board. It's about, finding out who you are as a team and, being closer as teammates. And that's the message that we're going to send is understand you're accountable.
A lot of veteran teams kind of walk in and you pretty much have the depth chart penciled in for the most part, but you have a lot of openings still, whether it be at the halfback spot in the secondary, whether it be maybe two receiver spots, potentially O-line guys. Is that a good thing? Does that excite you, or does that make you a little nervous because you're going in not really knowing?
No, I think it's exciting. Listen, training camps for competition, and guys are going to be here to compete, and I think that's the exciting part for everybody. Not just myself included, but as a player, that's what you want, right? So, I think going in with that mindset is the right mindset to have. It's not just being great one day or one period. It's over the course of camp and building that consistency, and that's what we're looking for.
Buck, you look at this team. From what we heard in the offseason, there's words like toughness, grit, resiliency for this team to improve upon. What are some of the keys in training camp? What are some of the things you want to see from your players to kind of really make that foundation solid when it comes to those principles we just talked about?
Well, you try and find out as much about your team as you can in the preseason, right, and throughout training camp. I think it's our job as coaches to put them in those situations to find out how we react and those type of things. I think it comes down to the first thing that jumps out is making sure us as coaches set the standard of what's expected, and then we continue to build on those foundational pieces, right? I think that's one way to do it. Consistency is the next, right? Understand it, this game and, winning at this level is hard, right? So we want guys that are able to push their limits a little bit and, relish in, the harder aspects of this game, right? I believe, every player wants to be coached, wants to be better, no matter where they are in their career. We're gonna push that limit a little bit in training camp.
One of the big keys, of course, for any coaching staff is get that veteran leadership core on board to almost be an extension of your staff in terms of your standards and what you want implied. Do you feel you're strong enough in that department that your veteran leader will also carry that message and those standards to the rest of the team?
Yeah, I think everybody leads in different ways, but I do believe that there's some players here that see the game as we do as coaches. Also, see the expectations as great opportunities to rise above and push our standards higher and higher. They've seen the way things have finished here in the past, and they're excited to get moving in a different direction.
Buck, is there something that you just absolutely hated as a player that you won't do as a coach at training camp, or will you do that and then some?
I'm sure there's there's certain things, but listen, we want to have an efficient camp that's competitive, and create an environment for the guys to push each other and get us ready to go. I believe the best camps have been that way. Being able to go to Kamloops for a number of weeks and just do ball, just do football. Offensive players sitting with defensive players, learning about the game. Obviously, the X's and O's that go into it, but just, being around football and engulfed in that environment is the best way to do it.
Ratio-wise, Buck, you've got some flexibility. You could go 3 Americans on the O-line, but you don't have to. You could start a Canadian linebacker, but you don't have to. On those specific areas, are you leaning one way or another, or are you open to all scenarios?
We're open to all scenarios. Somebody mentioned it earlier. There's competition everywhere, right? So we're gonna field the best roster that we can at the end of the day.
Injury-wise, when do you expect to have Josh Woods back?
I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll monitor him as we go. But obviously, we're excited about his progress, and we'll see where he's at.
Are there other players that you expect not to be ready for day one of camp? Other injury situations?
Not at the moment right now, no.